Hola, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. You're here with your host Mel Flowers, and today I want to talk about 2024 in terms of music. So 2024 in terms of music is looking up to be another promising year for music. We have Eternal Sunshine from Ariana Grande, the Torture Poets Department from Taylor Swift, Cowboy Carter from Beyonce, music from Dua Lipa, Conan Gray, and many other artists that I may probably be forgetting about because my taste in music is probably the same as it was back in middle school. Not that diverse. Even though many artists have already confirmed they're gonna be releasing new music later on this year, we don't really have to be looking too far into the future to know 2024 is gonna be a great year of music. We can actually go back into the past 2 months ago, and when I say 2 months ago, I say back in January when Kali Uchis released Orquideas and really set the bar for what music should be in 2024. More than just setting up a great and amazing start for music this year, Kali Uchis Orquideas is more than just the great music we have come to expect from her. And if I may quote from my own script, from its sound to its lyrics to its mere aesthetic, Orquídeas plays around with elements from Latin music that we Latinas have grown used to without losing the essence of the modern yet timeless sound Cali is known for. If anything, it is that harmony in this album between tradition and modernity that makes Cali's Latina roots truly shine. Or if I can put it more poetically, I think Orquídeas is a tribute to Latinidad that leaves a distinctive lipstick kiss on your cheek and makes you want to dance wherever you are. Because let's be real, Latino music has that kind of effect. So let's get comfortable, grab something to drink, because right now we're going to be replaying Orquídeas by Kali Uchis. But before we dive too deep into the topic, we need to start at the beginning. Who is Kali Uchis and what even is Orquídeas? If you do not know who Kali Uchis is, first of all, how dare you? But I can look past my judgment and tell you that Kali Uchis is a Colombian-American artist mainly known for hits like Telepatia, Moonlight, and of course, TikTok favorite, See You Again, Fit Tyler the Creator. Kali has devoted a great part of her life to music, working on it since 2012 and expressing interest in music for even longer than that. Her debut as an artist started with the mixtape Drunken Babble that she released on 2012 when she was just 19 years old. Then she released her debut EP, Por Vida, on 2014, and consequently, her debut album, Isolation, on 2018, which received critical acclaim. Though working with artists like Tyler the Creator, Gorillaz, Snoop Dogg gained her recognition in the music industry, her breakthrough from isolation and therefore popularity skyrocketed when Telepatia came out from the album Sin Miedo del Amor y Otros Demonios. It was this album, and more specifically this song in peculiar, that established Kali as an artist that was here to stay from her versatility and ability to work with different artists within different genres. So while Sin Miedo del Amor y Otros Demonios came out in 2020, Kali released her third album Red Moon in Venus back in 2023. And though the usual time between albums is 2 years, Kylie released her fourth album, Orquídeas, which is today's video's topic, on January 12th of this year. The funny thing is that even before Red Moon in Venus came out, Kylie was already teasing fans about a studio album in Spanish, even though Sin Miedo al Amor y Otros Demonios was just released 3 years prior. And once Red Moon in Venus came out, Kali upped the teasing and she started going even further about this album in Spanish after its release on social media. Basically, even before we can process the entire art that Red Moon and Venus was, Kali was already telling us that, hey, there's gonna be a new album coming out and it's gonna be sooner than you think. And she started this era of Orquídeas with Muñequita, Fidel Alfa, and City Girls, followed by Te Mata and Labios Mordidos with Karol G as the lead singles. Once January 12 rolled out and Orquídeas came out, success followed shortly after. It was critically acclaimed, earning a rating of 8.4 out of 10 by Pitchfork, who called the album as a manual for bad behavior where women took no shit from others, all while embracing a hyper-feminine image. It is also important to note that many sources describe the album as the fluidity of being a diaspora kid by incorporating Latin influences, no matter the period, into the elegant and silky sound that Kali is known for. As for the charts, the album debuted at number 2 on Billboard 200, becoming her second top 10 album. And the album also surpassed 400 million streams on Spotify, making it the fastest album to achieve so. As for popular opinion, people really seem to love the album, with Igual que un ángel feat Peso Pluma, Young, Rich and in Love, and Dame Beso Muévete being a few that made the most noise on social media. Now, if we're talking about my own personal opinion, this album has been probably on my Spotify roster for a long time. I think it was like a full month of just listening to the same 3 songs and then changing those 3 songs. It's an album that kind of grows on you. I think Kelly put something in this album because it's the way I could not stop listening to it. For me, Me Pongo Loca, Diosa, and Dame Beso, Muévete were my favorite ones. The whole album is just really beautiful. And now that I gave you guys my 3 favorite songs of the album, you are now legally obliged to just tell me your favorite ones. So just let me know your favorite songs of the album down below. But let's continue with the topic. The mere singles alone show us how diverse Latino music can be, rather than lumping it all together in one big ball that is really hard to distinguish one from the other and just has this huge misconception that Latino music sounds the same across all genres. And Kali with these singles shows the opposite. We have Dembow with Muñequita, we have Bolero with Te Mata, then we have Reggaeton en Perreo with Labios Mordidos. And once you get the whole album, it's really easy to see how Latinidad is present in its sound. And as one listens to the album in its entirety, it's very easy and clear to see its Latinidad from its sound alone, whether or not you're Latina or not. And that brings me to the next point, which is how the album Orquideas reinforces this Latinidad through sound. The most obvious starting point of this conversation is the array of Latino genre that the album has. A few days before the album came out, Kali described the album on her TikTok account as a, quote, an experimental Latin project with alt, disco, perreo, house, Latin soul, merengue, bolero, end quote. And sure enough, the album does keep the characteristics we usually see in Kali's work, such as the dreamy vibe-forward sound that highlights that feminine quality in it described by the Georgetown Boys. But as it was said earlier in the video, Kali does take inspiration from various Latin sounds, modern and traditional, mixing her Latin roots with her sound and the overall global influence in music that we have nowadays. The album flows between many genres, and that was one of the reasons why the album was critically acclaimed, each song showing a different facet of Latin genres, or as I like to call it, the quinceañera core. And let me explain it to you why. Now, if you've never been to a quinceañera, let me tell you, the playlists that we have on some quinces, it's really just a lot of variety. That's the best way I can tell you. So as soon as you come into the party, you start with the pop, the things that are popular in the radio. And in Orquídeas, we see pop in the form of Igual que un ángel featuring Peso Pluma, which, since he is Mexican and I am Mexican, I am obligated to play this. As the quinceañera party goes around, we start getting ready to dance now that we have all eaten, we have all taken a couple of drinks, and now we're in the mood to dance. And that's where reggaeton comes in. And in Orquídeas, we have Labios Mordidos with Karol G, we have Muñequita, and we have No Hay Ley. You know, the kind of music that tells the drinks in your body to, hey, we've been sitting around long enough, let's go out there in the dance floor. And as the night goes on, the music starts to shift from the younger people to something a little more classic, something that is just required to play at quinceañeras. That's when boleros come in, and in Orquídeas we have Te Mata. And now that the quinces have reached, the final form of music and everybody just wants to dance to whatever it goes, exactly, I'm talking about merengue and banda, which could not be better described than the song Dame Beso, Muévete, which, if you ask me, the best song in the album. It's no secret that Orquídeas incorporates many different and diverse Latin sounds in its music, allowing each song to shine through a different genre. While that might be enough to say that Orquídeas as an album is a tribute to Latinidad, I think that we are missing the other component about it. It's not only about the sound, but it's also about the language, and that is another element that Kali is known for. Her signature bilinguality. It is that bilinguality or bilingualidad that I like to say it in Spanish because deal with it, that highlights both Latino and multicultural roots. So we're going to be moving on to the next point about language in Orquídeas. Kali Uchis and other bilingual artists have incorporated said bilinguality in their projects. Though it is commercially successful, it isn't really something that the music industry is really sure of, especially when bilinguality is still something that they're calling experimental, considering how Kali's label discouraged her from singing in Spanish. As said in an interview for Music Fits, Kali shared that, quote, they had actually put it in my contract that only English language albums will count for my deal. Obviously, I didn't know that when I signed. So when I started working in Sin Miedo, I found that out. I found out that a Spanish language album wouldn't even count as an album in my contract, end quote. But just as with Sin Miedo, Orquídeas proves how Spanglish as a form of bilinguality can thrive in the music industry. Even though Orquídeas is a majorly based Spanish album, English is still sprinkled here and there with ease. In an interview for Grammy.com, Kali shared that, quote, I didn't feel completely confident about my writing yet to make fully Spanish songs. That's why I write so much bilingual. Being bicultural has always been part of my life, end quote. The presence of English in Orquídeas doesn't diminish its Latinidad, considering how much English can be present in our community, especially if you're in a border town or diasporic town, where it's usually the norm to balance between two or more languages, which fits into the bicultural or even multicultural aspect that each town has. Hearing one's language, especially in a bilingual manner like Orquídeas does, is empowering, and even more so when it comes from a homogeneous industry like music. If we take it a step further, even the features show this bilinguality because Kali mainly chose people from all over Latin America. She chose Peso Pluma not just because he was gaining a reputation in Mexico, but because she felt close to Mexican culture and its people from her closeness to her uncle who happened to be Mexican, which once again compelled me to play this again. Then we have Carol G, a Colombian artist and friend with whom Kali had collaborated before in Carol's Mañana Será Bonita Bichota season. Then we have Raúl Alejandro's feature in No Hay Ley Parte 2, a Puerto Rican reggaeton singer. And finally, we have El Alfa, a Dominican rapper whom Kali has referred to as a Latino legend. Yes, even though we can end the video now and say that yes, Orquídeas is an album that is a tribute to Latinidad because it incorporates Latin sounds and it has lyrics in Spanish, I think there's more than meets the eye and we can actually navigate this a little bit further, not just because the idea that, oh, language equals culture is wrong because A, language is just a part of culture, but culture is more than the language you speak, and also because Latinidad is more than just speaking Spanish, considering that there's Latin countries that don't have Spanish as their first language. The point I'm trying to make here is that while Orquídeas does have that Latin sound not only through its genres and its language, it's that Latinidad is more than just what we hear, but it's also what we see and what we feel. The aesthetic that this album and or era has, it does really incorporate Latinidad in ways that actually makes Latinos say, hey, that's actually part of my culture and I like seeing it. So right now we're gonna be talking about the aesthetic of Orquídeas. In an interview with Billboard, Kali explained that the orchid flowers symbolize timelessness, femininity, luxury, eeriness, and mysticality, as well as being the national flower of Colombia, thus naming the album as a tribute to the flower. Orquídeas just happened to be the perfect name for this album because it symbolized that feminine and luxurious sound of Kali while also being that Latinidad in music. Across Orquídeas' era, we see how this Latinidad goes beyond its sound and language and through motives commonly found in Latino culture. You can argue with me and say that this first one is gonna be a little bit of a stretch on my part, and I wouldn't blame you, but I do think it is important to note it, considering how this element is really present in Latino culture. And the first element is the use of biblical imagery. Orquídeas uses biblical imagery to illustrate the divine quality of her empowered femininity. So religion has been embedded in Latino culture. It isn't really something that you can put up to debate, and I think it is something that can be pretty obvious once you go and learn a little bit more about Latino cultures. Its religious values bleed into the culture's own, like collectivism and even into the language. Visually, we can see this biblical imagery in the video Tu corazón es mío, diosa. We see the stained glass with pink orchids, reminiscent of stained glass in churches to demonstrate some biblical story. We also see how nature comes into full center in the second half of the video, which has been associated as a sign of femininity, a sort of womb, due to Kali Uchis' pregnancy. In a way, the video Tu corazón es mío / diosa celebrates Kali's pregnancy and femininity by connecting it to religious motives such as being a goddess, using biblical imagery seen like the stained glasses, etc., etc., and etc. Then we have songs like Diosa, igual que un ángel, Te mata, and Heladito that draw said imagery in their lyrics into the narrative. For example, in Te mata we have Yo sé que soy la diabla de tu historia, la que sabía que para volar me tocaría encontrar mis propias alas, which translates to I that am the devil from your story, the one that knew that for flying I would need to find my own wings. Then in Heladito, we start the song with Ángel o demonio tú, angel or demon you, and then we move on to the verse saying Mi cama es un nube y yo soy un ángel, translating to My bed is his cloud and I am an angel. Then in Diosa we have Siempre a mi lado, dándole a su diosa ofrendas. It's what I deserve, soy un beneficio a tu salud. Translate to Always on my side, giving his goddess offerings. It's what I deserve, I am a benefit to your health. And finally, on Igual que un ángel's chorus, we have the lines God's favorite, sent from heaven down to earth, heaven's residency, yada yada yada. My point is that Kali has been known to use biblical imagery and motives in her work as well as other artists. Even if most terms and imagery are used rather loosely and are not connected to the religion itself, I do think it is noteworthy to add since the religion is embedded in Latino culture. To add it visually and narratively still alludes to religion in some ways, even if it's just metaphors to describe someone falling from grace, loving as devotion, love as tempting or humbling, or just how pure a person can be. Religious imagery can and has been used by artists, including Kali, to describe the mundane not by what it looks like, but how it feels like. Similar to how, in a way, much of the religion has bled into Latino customs and traditions. Then the other thing I found is how many sources have called the album as a manual for bad behavior, something hyper feminine, and I couldn't help but draw the parallels to what it means to be a bichota. Bichota basically means an empowered woman, someone who has control over her life, that doesn't let anybody walk over her. And there is something to say about femininity in Latino cultures that in and on itself it can be contradictory. On one hand, we have Marianismo that tells us that femininity is that delicate submissiveness to serve other people before ourselves. But then we have the whole ideology of what it means to be a bichota, and despite the ideals that Marianismo teaches women, practically, Latino femininity can be quite resilient, luxurious, and empowering. It's about being a bichota, being that woman that takes control of her life and just takes no shit from nobody. And we see this side of femininity in Muñequita and Labios Mordidos. It's about reclaiming your looks, sensuality, finding power in them, without being just that, without being reduced to how you look, and also being how you act. We could also say songs like Dame Beso that fracture specifically from the song, Diosa and Heladito have that empowerment by being direct and wanting to be worshipped. It's about knowing your worth and asking other people to level up to it rather than lowering your standards. It's actually setting your standards high and being firm about them. Thus, because we see, hear, and even feel how embedded Kali's Latin roots are in Orquideas, we see how the album becomes a tribute to Latinidad by how confident and empowered she feels from it alone. So what are the takeaways here? The first thing I want to note is that this element of Latinidad is significant, not only because it's a part of who Kali is as an artist, but because it reflects to what diasporic music can be. Pitchfork used this concept of diasporic to describe the album, both as a potential for more of its kind and to represent a diasporic community, such as the Latino community. If you do not know what diasporic means, and I wouldn't blame you given to my awful pronunciation of it, Diasporic means of being or relating to any group that has been dispersed outside of its traditional homeland, voluntary or not. And that is something that exactly happened to the Latino community, and a lot of Latinos were dispersed in the US. Basically, diasporic as a concept is about human displacement, placelessness, not being able to fully belong to a place and just being stuck to the middle, being in that liminal place and being in the in between. And that is the thing that Orquídeas is as an album. It's a liminal album that shines a light on what it means to be diasporic, shifting back and forth between English and Spanish, going back between what is modern and what is traditional, and it's about letting the in between be its own place by making the sum of its parts greater than the parts alone. It's about seeing that liminal place more than just a bridge, and also seeing the bridge as its own place that deserves its own acknowledgement and even celebration. Thus, we can consider Orquídeas as a result of that liminal place Kali and many other people before her and like her and surely after her come from. We have bits and pieces of different cultures we engage in simultaneously, and rather than aligning with one completely while disregarding the other, people embrace this liminality as an identity, which is the case with this album as it jumps back and forth between cultures until it creates its own. By creating its own culture, it is able to celebrate that Latinidad by incorporating various elements of the culture. It brings to light how versatile the sound, the language, and the visuals are in the Latino community and Latino art beyond to what it has been stereotypically reduced to. Kali once said in the Grammys interview, quote, "I feel like others see Latin music or Latin artists as just one thing. That's why I need to demonstrate all the genres of Latin music," end quote. As Kali said in another interview with Billboard News this time, she said that she wanted to redefine how we look at Latin music and Latinas in music, to expand the way people view all of the things we Latinos are capable of doing. And we go back into this idea of just being our own thing rather than just being stuck in the middle, being stuck between what it means to conforming to these stereotypical ideas of what Latin art is, or just succumbing and doing something completely different from Latinidad. And that is the other thing that Orquídeas does. More than just being a tribute to Latinidad, Orquídeas is also the representation of the in-between as its own valid thing. Orquídeas becomes a comfort that many diaspora kids need after years and years of being forced to choose one side or the other of the bridge, when the bridge is where they are the most comfortable in, when the bridge is where they feel their most authentic self. And as Kali shared in Billboard News, one of the goals with this album was to inspire other Latin artists, other Latinas, and any artists in general to play around with different genres, to get in the in-between rather to get in a box and just have fun with music rather than doing what other people expect you to. And that is the beauty of Orquídeas, a celebration of Latinidad, its sound, its art, to be more than just what people have stereotypically reduced it to, and to also represent and show and acknowledge how beautiful the liminal space can be once you don't tell people to just stay in a box and choose a side, and to actually embrace that liminality. Like I said in the beginning, Orquídea sets really high standards for music in 2024, not just because it has the great music that we have come to expect from Kali Uchis, but also because it has this Latino elements that really helps create this sort of community around the album, and it just makes us as a community really feel seen, really feel that there's music for us. There's something about seeing another artist in the US making this kind of music for us, thinking about representing and also trying to motivate us to make music that doesn't really put us in a box. So I think that's the beauty of Orquídeas, and the beauty that is basically Kali Uchis' love letter to Latinidad. Just I got chills from just thinking about it. It's not only great in terms of music and in message, but I think it's the first album in ages to actually get me hooked up on it. Dame Beso, Muévete, a great song. Again, quinceañera core. We got Heladito, then we have Igual que un ángel, Me Pongo Loca. Like, Kali just knows how to make bops, and I love it. And going back into that element of Latinidad, it's just an album that it's almost different from what we see usually in the mainstream, and even though it did hit like the charts, it's kind of like not usual for me to listen to it in the radio. But even though it has like all of these elements that you come to expect from Kali, but it's also kind of deviates from what we see in mainstream. And I think part of it, it's that Latinidad, that Latin sound that we hear in it. And it's just, ah, Kali, muchas gracias por hacer este álbum. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias por tanto y perdón por tan poco. But anyways, enough of my rambling because now we actually have to wrap this thing up. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please let me know by giving it a like, putting down some nice comments. I do not accept any comments saying anything awful about me because I even do my makeup for today and I made sure to match the Orquideas aesthetic. So you guys better be nice about it because I did put a lot of love into it, you know? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I get to see you all stick around for the next video. At the moment, you can follow me on TikTok. Yes, I have that one now. On Twitter, I will not call it X. Facebook, I know that one's old. And Instagram, all of the links down in the description box below. Support Kali Uchis, such an amazing artist, and support me, that is just starting. This is all I have for today, and this is Mel Flowers, signing out. See you guys.